I'm 60 now, and there's one truth I've been running from my whole life. Not because I didn't know it, but because I was scared of what it would say about me. My name is Nova. I'm 60 years old, and for the longest time, I believed youth was something you lose slowly, like it fades gently, quietly. But that's not true. Youth doesn't disappear. It gets taken away, one careless choice at a time. Before I tell you how, let me ask you something. Have you ever looked at someone older and thought, that won't be mid? I did too. I really did. If you're listening to this right now and something in your chest feels tight, maybe stay with me a little longer. And if stories like this speak to you, quietly tap like and subscribe. Not for the algorithm, just so you don't miss the rest of this journey. I didn't plan to tell this story. For years, I told myself no one needed to hear it. But then one morning, I caught my reflection in the mirror, and she looked tired, not old, just tired of pretending. I was 18 when I thought I had life figured out. 18 felt powerful. I had opinions, dreams, confidence that hadn't yet been tested by reality. I believed time was generous, that it would wait for me, that I could fix things later. That belief was my first mistake. But I didn't know it then. I grew up in a small neighborhood where everyone knew your name, your parents, and your future before you did. People told me I was smart, that I had potential, and I believed them so much that I stopped proving it to myself. At 18, I wanted freedom more than purpose. I wanted feelings more than direction. And I wanted approval without admitting I needed it. Here's something no one tells you when you're young. The choices that ruin your youth don't feel dangerous. They feel normal, comfortable, even exciting. I remember the first time I ignored my inner voice. It was quiet, just a whisper saying, "This isn't you." And I said back, "Relax. I'm young." Have you ever ignored that voice? The one that knows better but sounds boring. In my early 20s, I started measuring my life by other people's timelines. Who was ahead? Who was behind? Who looked happier? I smiled in photos. I laughed at parties. I told everyone I was doing great. And slowly, I stopped asking myself what I actually wanted. That's when the days started blending together. Not bad days, just empty ones. I chased comfort instead of growth. Easy relationships instead of meaningful ones, short-term happiness instead of long-term peace. I told myself I was living, but deep down I was avoiding responsibility, avoiding discipline, avoiding the uncomfortable truth that I was wasting something precious. Youth doesn't warn you when it's slipping away. It doesn't announce itself. It just quietly leaves the room while you're distracted. By 30, I had stories but no foundation, memories but no momentum, and excuses. I had plenty of those. People started saying things like, "You still have time." And I clung to those words like a lifeline. Time. That word felt endless. Let me pause here and ask you something important. If time suddenly became limited, what would you stop doing today? Because that question didn't hit me until it was too late. There was a night, I remember it clearly. I was sitting alone, scrolling through old photos. Faces I no longer talked to, dreams I no longer chased, and I felt this ache, not regret exactly, but recognition. I saw the pattern, the avoidance, the delays, the fear disguised as freedom. That was my first real moment of self-realization. Not dramatic, just painfully clear. I hadn't failed because I wasn't capable. I failed because I never committed. And that realization hurt more than any breakup or loss. I want you to understand something. I'm not telling you this from a place of judgment. I'm telling you this as someone who loved comfort too much and paid for it with years. Somewhere along the way, I started believing effort was optional. That discipline was for other people. That consistency could wait. That belief cost me my 20s and most of my 30s. I stayed in situations that drained me because leaving felt uncomfortable. I delayed decisions because choosing felt scary. I numbed myself with distractions and called it balance. But balance without direction is just stagnation. Have you ever felt busy but empty, productive but lost? That was me. By 40, life started asking harder questions: bills, responsibilities, health, and suddenly youth wasn't something I could hide behind anymore. I adapted, but I never fully healed. I survived, but I didn't build. And that's when the weight of my earlier choices started showing up. In my energy, in my confidence, in my relationships. I'm 60 now, and I can say this without drama or exaggeration. The mistakes that ruined my youth were quiet ones, invisible ones, the kind no one warns you about. In the next part, I'll tell you about the first mistake clearly, the one that made all the others easier to commit, and why most people don't realize they're making it until years are gone. Before you go, think about this. If the older version of you was watching right now, what would they be begging you to change? If this story feels familiar, share it with someone who's still figuring life out. And tell me in the comments, what age are you right now? Because where you are matters more than you think. And this is just the beginning. The first real mistake didn't look like a mistake at all. It felt reasonable, responsible, even. I convinced myself that waiting was wisdom, that delaying decisions meant I was being careful, that someday, when I felt ready, I would finally begin. But here's the truth I learned too late. Ready is a feeling that almost never comes. In my 20s, I kept saying, not now. Not now to risks. Not now to discipline. Not now to choosing one hard path over 10 easy ones. And every time I said, not now, time listened. It moved forward without me. I remember being 24, sitting in my car after work, engine off, radio silent. I had just finished another day at a job I didn't hate, but didn't love either. I told myself it was temporary, just a phase, something to pay the bills until life really started. Have you ever told yourself that? That this version of your life is just temporary? Years passed. Temporary became permanent. The mistake wasn't the job. It wasn't the place. It wasn't even the people. The mistake was postponing commitment. I didn't commit to learning deeply. I didn't commit to mastering anything. I didn't commit to myself. I stayed average because average felt safe. There's a strange comfort in blending in. No pressure, no expectations, no fear of failing publicly. But there's also a quiet cost, a slow erosion of confidence you don't notice until it's gone. By my late 20s, I had developed a habit of quitting silently. Not dramatic quitting, just emotional quitting. I'd start things with excitement and abandon them the moment they required consistency. Gym memberships, personal projects, relationships, dreams. I became very good at beginnings and terrible at endurance. Let me pause here. If you're honest with yourself, what have you started but not finished? I told myself I was exploring options. What I was really doing was avoiding discomfort, because commitment is uncomfortable. It asks you to show up on days motivation doesn't. It asks you to stay when novelty fades. And I didn't want that kind of pressure. There was a moment in my early 30s that still stays with me. A friend of mine, same age, same background, sat across from me at a small cafe. She looked tired, but fulfilled. She talked about her work with this quiet confidence, not excitement, not hype, just certainty. When she asked me what I was building, I laughed it off, changed the subject, made a joke. That laugh was my confession. I had nothing solid to point to. That night, alone, I felt something crack inside me. Not heartbreak. Something heavier. recognition. I realized I had been living in motion without direction, busy without progress, alive but unanchored. This was my emotional confession, even if no one else heard it. I was scared of choosing wrong, so I chose nothing, and nothing slowly chose for me. By 35, consequences became louder. Opportunities stopped knocking repeatedly. People expected clarity from me. Where is your life headed? What do you want next? Those questions felt invasive because I didn't have honest answers. Here's something I wish someone had told me earlier. Life doesn't punish you for choosing the wrong path as much as it punishes you for refusing to choose at all. The second mistake was closely tied to the first. I tied my worth to how others saw me. I shaped my decisions around approval. I avoided paths that might look strange. I stayed quiet when I should have spoken. I wanted to be liked more than I wanted to be fulfilled. And that need shaped everything. Have you ever held back an opinion because you didn't want to be judged? Ever stayed small so others felt comfortable? I did that for years. I let other people's expectations write my life, and then I blamed life for feeling empty. There was a moment, subtle but powerful, when I realized how deeply this mistake ran. I was at a family gathering, listening to relatives describe me. Nova is easygoing. Nova is flexible. Nova doesn't ask for much. They meant it as praise, but it landed like a verdict. I had become invisible to my own life. That was my self-realization moment, not dramatic, just devastatingly honest. I wasn't low maintenance. I was low commitment to myself. I had spent so long adapting to others that I forgot how to advocate for my own future. And once you forget that, rebuilding is hard. This is where many people check out mentally, because it's uncomfortable to see yourself clearly. So let me ask you something gently. Who are you becoming without realizing it? By 40, the emotional cost of these mistakes was undeniable. I felt behind, not compared to others, but compared to who I thought I'd be. I didn't hate my life, and that made it harder. Because dissatisfaction without misery is dangerous. It keeps you complacent. I had just enough comfort to stay stuck. Midway through my 40s, something shifted, not externally, internally. I began to feel tired of running from myself, tired of distractions, tired of pretending I didn't care. This was the emotional reset, the moment where pain turned into reflection. I started noticing time differently. Birthdays felt heavier, years felt shorter, and I realized something painful but freeing. I couldn't get my youth back, but I could stop wasting what was left. In the next part, I'll talk about the mistake that hurt the most. The one tied to relationships, boundaries, and self-respect. The one that drained my energy more than any job ever did. Before you leave this part, sit with this thought. If commitment scares you, what is it protecting you from? If this story is hitting close to home, leave a comment. Not for me, for you. Sometimes naming where you are is the first step forward. And if someone you care about feels lost, share this with them. Not as advice, as a mirror. There's a kind of tiredness that sleep can't fix. I didn't know it had a name back then. I just knew I was always drained, even on days when nothing bad happened. This mistake didn't come loudly. It came disguised as love, as loyalty, as being a good person. I spent most of my adult life giving more than I had: time, energy, understanding, second chances. And I told myself that made me strong. What I didn't realize was that I was slowly teaching people how to treat me. In my 30s and 40s, I was the one everyone leaned on. The listener, the fixer, the calm one. If someone needed help, I was there. If someone crossed a line, I smiled and let it go. Have you ever been proud of how much you can tolerate? I thought patience was a virtue. Turns out, unspoken resentment is a quiet poison. I stayed in relationships that drained me because leaving felt selfish. I accepted behavior that hurt me because I didn't want conflict. I explained away disrespect because they didn't mean it. But intent doesn't erase impact. There was a relationship, I won't name it, that shaped this mistake deeply. From the outside, it looked stable, normal, even successful. Inside, I was shrinking. I stopped asking for things, stopped expressing disappointment, stopped correcting what hurt me. I told myself love meant endurance. But love without boundaries isn't love, it's self-erasure. Let me pause here. When was the last time you ignored your own discomfort just to keep the peace? The emotional confession I've never said out loud until now is this. I was afraid that if I asked for more, I'd be left. So I asked for nothing, and slowly I became invisible. By my late 40s, I felt disconnected from myself. Not broken, just muted. I didn't know what I wanted anymore because I had trained myself not to want. That's a dangerous place to live. One evening, I remember sitting alone after a long day, staring at my reflection in the dark window. Not crying, just empty. And a thought crossed my mind that scared me. If my life stays exactly like this, would I be okay? The answer was no, and that honesty changed everything. That was my self-realization moment. Not about them. About me. I realized I had confused being needed with being valued. I had surrounded myself with people who benefited from my silence. And here's the hardest truth. Some people don't want you to grow. They want you to stay convenient. This realization hurt more than any breakup ever did, because it meant I had participated in my own neglect. There was grief in that. Grief for the years I spent over giving. Grief for the voice I silenced. This is where pain deepened, but reflection turned into something else. Clarity. I started setting small boundaries. Awkward ones. Saying no without explaining. Pausing before agreeing. Letting people feel uncomfortable. And something interesting happened. Some people drifted away. Some got upset. Some showed their true colors. And for the first time, I didn't chase. That was the beginning of hope. Not loud hope. Quiet, steady hope. Hope that maybe the rest of my life could feel different. By my early 50s, I had less people around me, but more peace inside me. I slept better. Thought clearer. Felt lighter. I learned that loneliness isn't always about being alone. Sometimes it's about being surrounded by people who don't see you. Here's something I wish I understood earlier. You don't lose people when you set boundaries. You lose people who were benefiting from you having none. Let that sit for a second. If this part of the story feels heavy, it's because many of us live here quietly, smiling on the outside, exhausted on the inside. And I want you to hear this without judgment. You are not weak for staying. But you are allowed to choose yourself now. This is the moment in the story where everything begins to shift, where reflection turns into direction, where regret stops being punishment and starts becoming guidance. In the final part, I'll share the last mistake, the one about time, about postponing joy, about assuming later is guaranteed, and I'll tell you what I would do differently, not to relive my youth, but to live honestly now. Before you move on, ask yourself one quiet question. Who benefits when you stay silent? If this story is helping you name something you've felt but never said, write it in the comments. Not to explain, just to release it. And if someone you love gives too much of themselves, share this with them. It might give them permission to breathe. This is Nova, still here on your channel's name. The most important part is next. The last mistake wasn't dramatic. No collapse, no explosion. It was quiet, dangerously quiet. I kept telling myself, I'll do it later. Later when life slows down. Later when responsibilities ease. Later when I feel ready. I treated time like a renewable resource. In my 20s, I postponed joy for success. In my 30s, I postponed rest for responsibility. In my 40s, I postponed myself for stability. And somewhere along the way, later, became a habit. I thought I was being mature. Turns out, I was delaying life. There were trips I didn't take because work came first. Conversations I postponed because I was too busy. Dreams I minimized because they felt impractical. I told myself, once things settle, I'll live. But here's the truth no one tells you early enough. Things don't settle, they shift, and time doesn't wait for permission. By the time I reached my late 50s, I noticed something painful. My memories weren't full of moments I lived, they were full of moments I prepared for. That realization hit me harder than any failure. One afternoon, I found an old notebook. Pages filled with plans, goals, one day, ideas. And suddenly I understood. Most of my regret wasn't about what I did wrong. It was about what I never did at all. The emotional confession I need you to hear is this. I didn't run out of time suddenly. I gave it away slowly. I assumed health was guaranteed. I assumed energy would return. I assumed people would stay. Nothing is guaranteed. This is where the story shifts from regret to responsibility. Because while I can't rewind my youth, I can still choose how I live now. At 60, I stopped waiting. I take the walk even if it's short. I say what needs to be said, even if my voice shakes. I enjoy small things without guilt. I rest without explaining. I no longer save happiness for a future version of myself. If you're listening to this at 18, 20, or even 40, hear me clearly. Discipline matters. Hard work matters. But postponing life is not maturity. Balance is not laziness. Joy is not a distraction. Rest is not weakness. Here's what I would do differently if I could speak to my younger self. I would stop chasing approval. I would protect my boundaries sooner. I would treat time like something fragile. And I would live more, not later, now. Because youth isn't just about age. It's about presence. You don't lose youth when you grow older. You lose it when you stop feeling alive. If there's one thing I hope you take from this entire series, it's this. Your future self is watching you right now. Not judging you. Just hoping you don't wait too long. Call the friend. Take the step. Start the thing. Rest when you're tired. Life doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for participation. I'm 60 now. I don't hate my past. But I respect time enough not to waste what's left. If this series made you pause, even for a moment, then it did its job.